Hello, everyone. Inspired by the wine-induced rant of one of my favorite YouTubers at the moment, the great Kraut and Tea, I will link to the particular video I'm talking about in the description. I've decided to grab a few good old American beers and talk to you about something that's been on my mind for quite a while. It may be a topic that's a little beaten to death as it's several months old, but I'd like to talk for a second about Sargon of Akkad's infamous, or rather famous, whatever you may like to say, his petition regarding the SJW courses. I believe I had some special insight that I tried to get in touch with him, but you know, getting in touch with a big famous YouTuber, pretty difficult. So, I thought I had some special insight as I am an American currently attending university at a large public university, 30,000 plus students in a major metropolitan area. It's not some weird little private school, not some tiny hippie college. This is a large institution, a large taxpayer funded institution, or rather, a taxpayer subsidized institution. No free college here. However, the one special thing that my college has, not only does it offer these quote unquote SJW classes, it straight up requires them. Yeah, you heard me right. Sargon of Akkad was worried about just universities having these classes and that they're basically indoctrination classes. I agree. I agree many of these courses are blatantly indoctrination courses, but my university requires them. To explain what I mean, our university has gen ed requirements, as most universities do, where we're required to do simple things like take math to a certain level, take English to a certain level, take 6 credits, I think, of humanities, take certain number of credits of social science. Just basic things every student has to accomplish before moving on to their specific major. Well, one of the requirements is, as they call it, 3 credits, or a one semester class. Excuse me. Of quote unquote cultural diversity. Yes, we're required to spend one class for a semester on indoctrination. Now, I must say, it's not all horrible. Many of these cultural diversity classes, I think, are perfectly acceptable and legitimate courses. Things like African American history post-Civil War. Things like Latino American literature. These are legitimate studies of, well, for example, Latino literature, where it is an English course, basically, but just focusing on Latino American authors. I think these classes have value to people like history majors and literature majors to give them a broader scope of authors. Because we don't want our education to be focused just on white writings, white men's writings. I do think there is value in just a little broader scope. So requiring some of these classes for these majors, I fully understand. But some of the courses are not this way. Some of the courses are not just a history course that happens to focus on a particular ethnic group. Some of these courses are the ones like I unfortunately chose. Now, for a little more background, I am a business major, an economics major. I have no business taking most of these courses, but they're required, so I sucked it up and took one. I picked one called Multicultural America, and it claimed to be a class that would explain the challenges and techniques companies use to create media in a multicultural America. And I thought, okay, we learned a little bit about how advertisers can market to some of the very diverse communities in the United States. That can't be all bad, you know. I might even enjoy it. Well, as many who have gone to university know, the course description on classes is not always very accurate. I get into the class, and long story short, don't want to bore you on the details. It's basically a history of how white people have been so horrible and racist and used racist caricatures of black people in our advertising, and did not touch on how modern companies are making changes and doing things to include different minorities in our advertisings, to appeal to African American families or Latinos. It never even talked about the fact that, American companies are creating Spanish ads to put online for Latino users. It didn't talk about any of this stuff. It simply focused on white people, bad. And not to mention the fact that most of it wasn't even focused on media. Most of it was just a history of white people in America being racist, of which there's a very long history, without a doubt. But it was not the class I signed up for. It was not what I thought the legitimate and useful class would be. It just became another SJW, all white people are racist, just patting each other on the back, calling all white people racist. For example, we spent an inordinate amount of time talking about how Chinese immigrants to California in the late 1800s faced racial stereotypes and just straight up racist laws. Nothing to do with multicultural America today. And on top of this, my professor for the class was not a history major, not even some kind of SJW. She was a a ceramics professor. She taught ceramics normally and was teaching this class. Really had no business teaching us about multicultural America. Actually, ironically enough, she was a South African. Yes, you had me right. A South African that left South Africa, as apartheid was crumbling. I'm sure she could tell me all about harmonious racial relationships in a country. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, because she was absolutely unqualified to be teaching this material. For example, we were talking about the race riots that happened throughout the United States in the 60s in many major metropolitan areas. And again, nothing to do with what the course was supposed to be about, just talking about white people beating up on black people. Well, in this lecture, she claimed that the cops had fired mustard gas at the black rioters. Yes, mustard gas. Ironically, I was in a World War I history class at the same time. For the few of you that may not know what mustard gas is, it is a poison gas used in warfare since World War I. Even in the Syrian civil war today, every once in a while you hear a news report claiming someone used mustard gas. Saddam Hussein used it against the Kurds. It is a nasty chemical that will kill people. Or permanently blind them. It may not necessarily kill you, but it is bad. I raised my hand and simply said, wow, mustard gas. That's pretty nasty stuff. Are you sure? She said, oh yeah, mustard gas. She failed to correct herself. She insisted on claiming that a U.S. local police force fired mustard gas on black protesters and rioters. After the class, researched the event just to make sure that I wasn't one that was full of shit. And sure enough, it was tear gas. There was never a mention of mustard gas, obviously. But basically, it goes to show the type of inept teachers teaching these courses. So, really long story short, I agree. These classes are being taught by teachers not qualified to teach the material. Many of the classes are teaching irrelevant information. I think these courses absolutely need to be evaluated. I think there is a lot of just indoctrination out there. I think many of these classes offer no valid information. And I absolutely do not think they should be required by all majors, no matter who they are. We are required to take them. That is absolutely asinine in my mind. Yeah. But that being said, some of the classes I don't think are totally worthless. Obviously, I think all these classes need to be evaluated and vetted, but there are many that I think are perfectly fine classes that can be offered at any university. For example, as I said before, African American history since the Civil War. This could be an interesting course, not one that I would necessarily take because it doesn't apply to my specific major, but I absolutely think it has a right to be offered. But the class I took, I think, should be vetted. Many of the classes I've heard my friends and classmates also took also should be vetted. We need to look at these things. So that's really all I've got on the specific topic of Sargon of Akkad's petition. But I also discovered something else when looking up a couple more things about my university's requirements. My university evidently has a social justice warrior LLC, rather a social justice LLC. They did not call themselves social justice warriors. An LLC is something many universities have in concept. It stands for Living Learning Community. It's basically a designated area of my university, the dorms. It's a designated area of the dorms, a section of units that has something in common. For example, there is a business LLC, which is a section of dorms where all the inhabitants are business majors. Idea being that you have some of the same classes as your classmates. I was not involved in an LLC, but I get the value to some of them. This, however, is an LLC people can elect to be put in, occupied entirely by SJWs. And something that I'm sure is just an absolute clusterfuck, an echo chamber of just SJW nonsense. And the fact that this is something that my university funds and organizes, I think is just ridiculous. I have no problem with there being SJW clubs on my campus, but the fact that this is an official organized part of my university's housing is ridiculous to me. Anyway, those are some of my ramblings and insights on some of the ridiculous stuff that is happening in American campuses today. Something that I don't know if people that aren't currently in university today fully know about. Many of these YouTubers I respect immensely, I know are at least a bit older than me, or at least out of college, or out of their undergrads, or just aren't Americans and aren't seeing some of this asinine bullshit firsthand. So, yeah, I guess I'll call it quits before I just start aimlessly rambling some more. Until next time.